My name is Deborah Aldrich. I'm from Australia. I'm an author, a lived experience speaker, and an advocate for adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse to speak up and reclaim their power. My abuse was intrafamilial abuse, and intrafamilial means that it was perpetrated by a family member. And this could be anyone from a parent, a grandparent, a step-parent, an uncle, an aunt, a cousin, or a sibling, anyone considered to be a member of your family. My abuse started around the age of 4 to 5 years old, and it went on till I was about 14. During this time, because I lived in the same household as my abuser, I was very damaged as a young girl. The anxiety, just the low self-esteem, my confidence, that they took away, all these things have affected me right throughout my whole life. And I did disclose to my parent when I was around about 10 years old, but unfortunately they didn't take it seriously enough and only spoke once to my abuser about what they were doing to me to tell them to stop. And it didn't. And they didn't check in with me. They didn't, ask me once again, has it stopped? Are they still hurting you? And because of this, it just continued. And I've just spoken to them recently, actually, to say to them, you didn't ask again, you didn't check in, you didn't make sure this person didn't have access to me. And they said to me that, why didn't you tell me? And I said to them, well, because you didn't make it significant and you didn't help me the first time and you didn't stop them abusing me. So why would I speak up again? And from my education and research I've done in this area of child sexual abuse, children very often don't speak up once because they're being manipulated and controlled by their abuser, which I was. And so this was, as I mentioned, very damaging to me as a young girl. And through my teenage years, I started rebelling. I left school when I was 16. Didn't feel like I was smart enough, didn't have any confidence, low self-esteem, and just couldn't deal with being at school any longer. And so then I started partying, I started drinking, I started rebelling, I started going to nightclubs when I wasn't of legal age. All the things that, can be seen as a trauma response as somebody who's not dealt or who's had no healing and help from what happened to them as a young girl. And I got really, really angry as well. There's a lot of anger there that started coming up. I was a single mum by the time I was 19, and I continued during the time that I had boyfriends, partners, to let them treat me badly because I had no self-esteem, and just didn't feel worthy as a person, and felt like, well, this is how I'm to be treated as a woman in this world, and sucked it up and put up with it. I had tried to talk to the adult in my life who I disclosed to probably about every 10 years or so. I'd brought the situation up again and they pretty much shut me down. They didn't want to talk about it because their close relationship they had to my abuser, it was distressing to them to have to think that this might have happened under their watch. So they silenced me all these times that I brought it up. I had been seeing a psychologist from about the age of early 20s, which, I didn't get given any help as a kid. And unfortunately, this happens in a lot of intrafamilial circumstances, whereas if our abuser had been a stranger or a neighbour or somebody that wasn't a close family member, that we would have got help and healing, but also they would have been held accountable and punished and prosecuted. But because of the close relationship that my abuser had to me and my family member who I disclosed to, none of this happened. And it was around about the age of 44 when I was talking to a psychologist that they said to me, Deb, you don't have to see your abuser, you know that, don't you? And I kind of looked at them and I went, how am I gonna navigate that? How's that gonna work? Because, this is a close family member. And I kind of shelved it for a little bit, and then I started thinking about it, and it was the time of my abuser's birthday, and I just couldn't bring myself to ring them because I was just so angry. And I decided not to call them on their birthday, and I finally sat my dad down, who had never been told by my other adult what had happened to me, and I'd never spoken to him about it either. And yeah, it was a really distressing conversation. He was in his 70s by then, and pretty much he went pale, white as a ghost. Blood just drained from his face because he had no idea what had happened to his little girl. And he was very, very angry. And he was very angry at, you know, his partner for not telling him what had happened to me. And unfortunately, about 5 months later, we lost my dad. He had cancer, and that was really, really, really hard time for me, because I had just spoken to him about what happened to me and was trying to deal with it and heal, and then I had to just shelve it once again. So yeah, then I realized that the person who didn't protect me was still trying to silence me, and I started writing about what had happened to me, and also advocating for other adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And I did this by writing my story on a child protection website's survivor stories issue. And I had my other adult come round one day, and I told them that I was writing a book and advocating for adult survivors, and they told me I couldn't do it because, once again, that the secret of what happened in our family was more important than, you know, their daughter healing or having a voice. So they tried to shut me down once again, and, you know, I've barely had any contact with them since then, because I realized that the secret of what happened to me was just far more important, and the sake of appearances in their family was far more important than me. And, you know, it wasn't until they walked away that day and I finally got the answer I needed to be set free, in a way, because I just realized, you know, I can't have these people in my life. They're detrimental to my mental and physical health. I've had a lot of health issues, started with IBS from a very young age, and yeah, different autoimmune things, anxiety, panic attacks, and not dealing with it. Unfortunately, as a survivor, we find out eventually, whether it's in our 40s or 50s or whenever it is, that our body will have these responses if we don't deal with our mind and help us, you know, whether it's through a psychologist, meditation, exercise, getting away from people who haven't protected you or have abused you in your life, are the only ways that I feel a survivor can really find who they truly are and find the person they were born to be. And as I mentioned, I started writing, and I ended up writing and publishing a book. It's called Circling the Wagons, and I wrote it. It's a very easy to read book. I wrote it from survivor to survivor. I know there's a lot of textbook type of books out there that might be a bit harder for people to understand, but mine has a lot of examples that people can relate to. I've got a lot of poetry in there with shows how I've struggled. And it's a kind of a nice way to get those emotions out through my poems. And I also wrote it for family and friends of survivors, because we have a lot of negative and toxic reactions and behaviors in our life due to the abuse that we went through. And a lot of the times that we're actually discredited our stories, because people go, oh, well, you know, they're an alcoholic, or they're a drug addict, or, you know, they've had these domestic violence situations that they've gotten into because of their low self-esteem. And then the family finds it really as an easy way to discredit us, and our abusers are never held accountable. So unfortunately, yeah, a lot of our families don't understand, because we become the black sheep of the family in a lot of ways because of our negative reactions. So I wrote my book, as I said, Survivor to Survivor. It's also for families and friends to understand, and I have left 5 blank pages at the end, 5 lined blank pages, so that a survivor can write their story at the end. Because what I had found is when I tried to speak to the adult in my life about what impacts my childhood sexual abuse had had on me, they came up with really ignorant responses, or they'd minimize the abuse and make it not significant, and I'd have an overreaction to that. So we never could verbally get through to understanding. She couldn't understand me, and she'd kind of silence me, and it was just too hard for her to deal with. So the reason that I left these lined pages at the end is if a survivor reads my book and they can, get a lot of help and healing through understanding. I explain why we weren't responsible for what happened to us. Too long to talk about right here, but they can also give it to their family member or loved one or friend, so that person, once they read my story and my book, they can then the survivor can write their own story at the end, and then that family member can understand a bit more after they've heard about how trauma affects us and all the reactions we have and how we feel about ourselves, and then they read their family member's story at the end. So the paperback, I've got those pages in at the end. And I've been involved in research through universities to try and pay forward what I now know and what was lacking in my help and what my parents should have done better, and to educate frontline workers on all signs and red flags of children who are being abused, potentially and particularly in the family home. I've done speaking events. I've done a talk at a domestic violence event to open up intrafamilial sexual abuse as a form of domestic violence, because domestic means home and sexual abuse is violence. And we don't talk about these things at these type of events. And I really think that it should be. And because intrafamilial abuse is a taboo, nobody wants to hear about it. But as I always say, if you don't even want to hear about it, how do you think a child felt living through that their whole life? So I'm going to end with a poem. It's called Hand on Your Shoulder. And I wrote this for all other survivors. And it's about how when our parent didn't step in and protect us, how we become our own protector or our own hero at the end. So I'm just going to throw my glasses on and I'm going to read you this poem. So as I said, it's called Hand on Your Shoulder. You see the world through your innocent eyes, one of God's little angels just in disguise, finding magic in places adults long ago forgot, all the time in the world until it suddenly stopped. Your senses now heightened, like a rabbit aware. At night time you whisper another unheard prayer. You wake with a start, something makes you turn cold. There's a hand on your shoulder, you're suddenly old. Like a jackrabbit, your eyes dart here and there, breathing shallower now, but does anyone care? One day a small child, without a care in the world. Next day under the covers, in a ball, you are curled. Such a big secret to hide for such a sweet soul. You can't get back what that monster just stole. No more than a child, now you're feeling so old. Again that hand on your shoulder, your body turns cold. At night time you dream of your world before this, of rainbows and unicorns and mum's sweet kiss. Can't she see that you've changed, no longer a child? Do you hide it so well when pretending to smile? You've grown quieter now than ever before, pleading don't leave when mum walks out the door. Don't want to go to school, just want to hold on to mum, unable to understand why and feeling so numb. But mum never found out and you never told. Couldn't quite find the words, they had such a hold. So you went through your life, this secret held tight, always hoping one day you'd find strength to fight. One night you dream you are older, standing so tall. There's a ruckus outside, shadows cast on the wall. You wake with a start, someone's walked in your room. It's my monster again, your mind always assumes. There's a hand on your shoulder, but not the same one. Your prayers have been answered, there's no need to run. You took a lifetime to find you, but you're finally bolder. That gentle hand on your shoulder is you when you're older. Thank you.